So we'll get started. This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience. There's an assumption that people make about Kansas City. They hear logistics hub, they think about the geography, they think warehouses, highways, Amazon boxes, and that's not wrong, but it's only about 10% of kind of what that whole opportunity represents. The real picture is this: there are six Class 1 railroad hubs that all converge in this region, more than anywhere else in the country. And last year, the CP-KC merger created the first railroad that runs a single line from Canada to Mexico, and it runs through Kansas City. Not only do we sit at the center, the intersection of this country, the geographic center of the country, we have foreign trade zone infrastructure and highway access that really the coastal markets can't replicate. So this is an important conversation for a variety of reasons. I think when we think about what really powers this region, what really makes this region run, I think myself for a really long time didn't fully understand what that meant. So my guest tonight actually does and has been in the center of this for a while. And has been, Chris Gutierrez is the president of KC SmartPort, and he spent years building the case for what this region represents and to attract more, and I think is probably best suited to help us understand not only kind of the history and help us understand the data points and the facts behind that, but also, what does this mean for potential investment in the future, innovation, economic growth, some of those types of things. So, Chris, I'd actually like to start by kind of building this picture from the ground up. When most people hear supply chain and logistics, they think shipping and warehouses. Like I was saying, what are they missing about what that represents for Kansas City?
Yeah, first let me point out, I heard this next week's event's going to be more of a party, not like tonight, so I'm not sure if that's setting the stage of how we're going to go tonight. So if you want to party, there's drinks and food in the back. But if you think about Kansas City, just the fact that we're central to North America makes us a logistics and transportation hub. And the thing that I always love to point out that people forget, we have all four modes of transportation in Kansas City: river, highway, rail, and air. That alone is unique to a metropolitan area, that companies that move freight have choice. They can work on any mode of transportation, move things around. The other thing we have is the ability to move freight very efficiently. There's an old saying that the trucking industry had, that freight at rest is freight at risk. You've got to make sure your freight, any of you that move freight or you have your own freight, the more it's moving efficiently, the more money you're making because it's getting to the customer. That advantage in Kansas City that we don't, granted, all of us can complain a little bit in the car on 5 o'clock going home if you're on I-35 stuck for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We don't have congestion compared to other markets. Freight and people move very efficiently. Again, I'm one of the guys that complains when I get on I-35 sometimes, but then you're clear and you're moving. And you can move freight and people, the workers, around this region, multiple routes. Without going in a city street or a neighborhood, you've got highway infrastructure here to move freight. So again, all of these things add an advantage to our market that historically has been this. We were the first rail bridge across the Missouri River. All those kind of things that step. We don't want to be a logistics hub. We've always been a logistics hub.
So you talk about the multimodal aspect of the infrastructure. I want to talk a little bit about it's not just that we have all four modes that you outlined, it's the scale at which we have all four modes as well. So my understanding is we are the top railhead from a tonnage perspective in the United States.
Correct. Largest rail center in the U.S. by tonnage. And to correct your earlier comment, we only have 5 Class 1 railroads because CP and KCS merged.
They merged.
Into CP-KC, so now we have 5. But again, significantly more infrastructure, capabilities, facilities, rail yards than most cities. Chicago's the #1 by the number of rail cars that move in and out of their city. Our joke always is our freight cars are full, so we are #1 by tonnage. But a lot of it is grains, agricultural commodities, coal, some significantly heavy freight that moves through Kansas City from all parts of the U.S.
I think a lot of the perception is, we land, like an Amazon facility in Gardner, in parts of Kansas City, and people think that it's about moving consumer products, but you just listed out a bunch of other things from a supply chain perspective that are critical that move through here. Talk a little bit about the air freight as well, because I think people underestimate, the air freight that moves in and out, and some of the statistics about how close we are to, in proximity and distance to the rest of the markets in the United States.
Yeah. I think traveling to KCI, which KCI is an incredible asset to us, it's the front door, nationally, globally recognized. A lot of us don't go down Mexico City Avenue. We're going to the terminal, we're picking up friends, we're leaving, whatever. If you go down Mexico City Avenue, that's the freight corridor. So all of the FedEx, UPS, US Postal services there, DHL, but then there's also just dedicated freight carriers out of that airport. We are one of the largest cargo freight air centers in the Midwest. And again, it's that central location, the ability to move freight around the US. And again, the Amazon comment, it amazes me what you can buy on Amazon. So yeah, it's not just consumer products, it's everything, large size. Some of the facilities in Kansas City are large freight items for Amazon. It's not small pick and pack type stuff. So again, we can move all of that freight very efficiently. And the stat is about 95% of the US population can be reached from Kansas City in 2 days. Mainly that's by truck, but you've got the air cargo capability. That alone, from an e-commerce standpoint, has really helped us grow from a warehouse distribution. But I know there's a couple of freight carriers in the room. Opportunity to move more freight in and out of our region is significant for us.
So talk to me about what a foreign trade zone is and what that means to the region to have that footprint here.
Yeah, SmartPort, not only are we the Regional Economic Development Group, we also manage the greater Kansas City foreign trade zones. Unique to Kansas City, all of Kansas City is unique being on that state line. We represent foreign trade zone number 15 on the Missouri side and number 17 on the Kansas side. It's a federal program. It's run by the Foreign Trade Zone Board out of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It was created in the 30s to allow companies in the U.S. to compete against their competitors overseas. It allows you to import freight into the Kansas City Foreign Trade Zone, your facility, not pay the tariff. We can talk about tariff chaos going on right now, but not pay the tariff till you actually sell it into U.S. commerce. So you can keep it over your warehouse for 10 years, 3 months, whatever it is, there's no time limit. Once you sell it in the US, you pay the tariff. If you export it to another country, you brought it in, export it, you never pay the tariff because it didn't enter US commerce. If it comes in and it's damaged, you destroy it, you don't pay the tariff because you didn't sell it. A lot of advantages on the cash flow opportunity. But from an export standpoint, it really gives companies advantage to bring freight that they can't get in the US into the US market and distributed around the world from Kansas City or another foreign trade zone. They're numbered numerically. There's about 350 foreign trade zones. We were early in this process. The gentleman that really created the foreign trade zone program, as you see it today, is an attorney in town called Marshall Miller. That's why you see a lot of opportunities at Kansas City from a consulting standpoint or a foreign trade zone standpoint. We move a significant amount of freight in and out of those zones compared to our competitor cities in the Midwest.
No, I think this is a perfect example of some of the parts, because I want to talk about the CPKC merger. We talk about foreign freight coming in and out with the rail line now, from Mexico to Canada coming through Kansas City. It seems like it opens up a lot of those opportunities. I've had multiple conversations in the last month with people. We're working on corporate innovation. We're working on bringing more corporate partners into the work we do. And we brought up CPKC, and people were like, well, what would the stadium have to do with the work we're doing? And I was like, hold on a minute. Do you guys know who CPKC is?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks, maybe miss that news or don't understand the impact of that merger on kind of the work that you guys do.
You're familiar with corporate mergers and what could happen to them?
I'm familiar with
we won't
those
bring it
things.
up.
Oh, yeah. Still too soon.
But unique to Canadian Pacific merging with Kansas City Southern Railroad, their headquarters, CP's headquarters in the U.S. was Minneapolis. It is now here. They've brought significant leadership from both Canada and the U.S. to Kansas City. They've gutted and expanded and redeveloped their downtown headquarters. They've built assets in our market. And again, if you look at statistics, U.S. largest trading partners are Mexico and Canada. That north-south access for CPKC really brings us an advantage that the other Class 1 railroads that go east and west connecting Kansas City to the CPKC and other markets. It really has seen everything you could think that Canadian market builds and manufactures, from lumber to automotive parts to finished parts, come through Kansas City. Value-added activity happens here sometimes, and it goes to Mexico and vice versa. It's been a huge advantage for us to not only promote the transportation asset, but the fact that you can bring consolidation, deconsolidation, value-added activity here and still be on that CPKC line is unbelievable. But I do love the stadium. When we score, that CPKC railroad horn goes off. What a way to let people know the market you're in.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I wish more people made that connection, and so hopefully we can continue to get that word out there. You brought up something earlier in your comments that has a special meaning here. The first permanent crossing of the Missouri River, and that opened up 4 new industries and kind of defined Kansas City's economic fortunes for the next 100 years after the Hannibal Bridge was built. What I think a lot of people don't realize, and the reason that this is called the Keystone Innovation District, is that the company that built that bridge was the Keystone Bridge Company. And so talk about opening up new industries and new opportunities, that represented a huge change in terms of population growth and economic fortunes for the region. Talk to me a little bit about the other industries that people might not realize are part of, kind of what you guys are working on, or that are served by, this being a supply chain and logistics hub like it is.
Yeah, I should have said it earlier, but my main day job is to promote this region, 18 counties, both sides of the state line, for new investment of industrial companies. So manufacturing, distribution, warehousing. Net new. We work with a lot of the local companies as well, but net new. What we're seeing right now is and have been over the last 10 plus years, food and beverage companies, because you think the ingredients, both agricultural commodities, livestock, you interviewed Kim with the animal health industry, their products are here and their ability to distribute that around the U.S. is here. The automotive sector with GM and Ford, they continue to grow. Ford is the best-selling vehicle, both vehicles are best-selling in the U.S. GM is retooling. We're going to see some new opportunities there. We already have projects of automotive suppliers coming into the Kansas City region to support GM and continue to support Ford. We're seeing a lot of what we're calling the battery supply chain with Panasonic's investment out in DeSoto. There are companies that are coming in to support Panasonic. There are companies that come in to independently support the electrification of industries. There's a company in Liberty that manufactures batteries for forklift operations. International company from Europe picked Kansas City, the region, to do that. We're seeing more and more of those companies come. We talked earlier about the critical minerals industry to support that whole sector that supports batteries and laptops and cell phones and vehicles and everything. There is a base here that we forgot about. We used to be one of the largest mining sectors here. I don't know if it's true. Someone said they're working with the Critical Minerals Crossroads group, but we used to mine lead in Missouri, and we dumped a bunch of stuff outside the mine, took the lead, and we're done. In those piles that we left are some of the most advanced critical minerals that we need, and they're just sitting out there. And now we need to figure out how to extract them and put them back in the industry. The other sector we're seeing is what I'll call industrial equipment. So it's plastics, it's heating and cooling systems, it's other things that are supporting the manufacturing industry. They're not manufacturing products that you buy, but they're supporting the manufacturing sector. And a majority of our manufacturing deals right now are foreign companies, considering the Midwest to be central to North America.
So, great segue, Chris. We talk about a lot of the critical minerals and critical materials work that had happened in this region was sold to foreign interests at one point in time because we didn't see value. We didn't see the long-term value. And like you said, there were piles of things that we didn't understand because, it wasn't important at the time.
Right.
Now we're starting to see those things become more important, but we're also starting to see, a phrase that's thrown around a lot now is nearshoring. So how do we bring the things back that were once here? And what role has that nearshoring activity had for you, the organization, and kind of what we're doing here in the region?
I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, a majority of our projects that have considered Kansas City have been foreign companies. You can call it nearshoring, but you can also call it that they're coming into the biggest market in North America. Their growth, they're not closing their European operation, they're expanding into the U.S. There are some nearshoring where they're bringing it back because labor costs, transportation costs, supply chain risk, all those things are an advantage to be in the U.S. that before they thought the advantage was in Asia or Europe or wherever they took a facility. So we're spending a lot of time the last 4 or 5 years in international markets. We used to rely on the 2 states that have foreign offices to do that. Now we're taking Kansas City delegations into Europe, into Japan, into markets to present the Kansas City story, sometimes in partnership with the state or both states, but sometimes on our own. We took advantage of the Chiefs being in Frankfurt a few years ago. You know, there was Kansas City Chiefs, I got my socks on, they were everywhere, and we were pitching to German firms why Kansas City makes an advantage. We had some great meetings. We had the governor of Kansas, lieutenant governor of Missouri. We had two mayors, both one from each side, telling the story of why this is a one Kansas City market, and it's resonating. I was in Spain earlier this year. I'll be in Italy in a little while, a couple months, telling that story because those companies know they need to be in this market for the growth. And they're navigating the tariff situation. Their budgets, their business plans are changing a little bit, but they know they need to be here. They've just got to get that certainty in the market to move forward.
So Chris, there's markets like Dallas and Atlanta that have some competitive advantages. In Chicago, you mentioned, and some of the even in Nashville that has some competitive leverage in these conversations. When we talk about the Midwest, we often talk about affordability, cost, especially as you guys are recruiting maybe more of the industrial elements that make up the need to have the logistics and the supply chain. Is that defensible long term, or what really makes what you're selling in these conversations? What makes Kansas City defensible kind of long term?
I moderate a panel tomorrow morning on the industrial real estate sector in Kansas City. And while rents have increased over the last few years, there's still nothing compared to the coast. I mean, we still have that competitive advantage. Locally, I joked about complaining about traffic. You can complain about permitting and zoning and things in the Kansas City market, but compared to other markets, it's nothing. That speed to market that we can present to companies that, hey, you need to build a certain size building, we can move that faster than most markets. You're right, construction material, other things are going up, but again, we're a competitive market, competitive pricing for that. And to give you a stat, Kansas City is about 31st, 32nd largest metropolitan area by population. We're the 15th largest by the industrial footprint that's here, building space, square footage here, hitting way above our weight class. There's so much opportunity for growth in Kansas City, and it is very defensible. The other part of that is labor. There's an edge to our labor force. Granted, there is challenging in the labor market, keeping workers, training workers, skilling workers, but there's a little bit of an edge here in Kansas City that workers still have that agrarian base. They want to come to work. They want to learn. They want to be treated right. They want to be part of the growing company. They don't want to be a number. They want to have that culture around it. But you're seeing Kansas City's got a little bit of that edge as bringing in labor. So all of that, absolutely defensible. And it's been working in Kansas City.
I'd buy it. I might be biased. I'm curious, take us inside the room. What tips that conversation for a lot of these folks when you're having this conversation about Kansas City? Because a lot of the things that you've said, I imagine some of those things are some of the things that our competitive cities, our regional peers are saying as well. But what tips those conversations for Kansas City?
Our client base mainly is a group called Site Selection Consultants. The company hires them to find the location. Somewhat of a way to keep the identity of the company secret because of stock market concerns, competitive concerns, their current workforce. So the consultants, all of the major cities have a guy like me that's pitching their story. Two things resonate very well here. When we have a client come in town, my office is at Union Station, we meet in our conference room, and in that room is a representative from the state of Missouri, a representative from the state of Kansas, the communities, and we're talking about Kansas City over Dallas, over Chicago, over Columbus. Having that in the room is a huge impact that this market moves together. Yes, we can all have a drink later and complain about certain things that happen in our market with the state line, but it doesn't happen very often. There's a team effort that moves that forward. There are markets like Cincinnati that the Cincinnati group will show you around, leave you at the state line, and Kentucky show you on the other side. We never let our clients know when we've crossed the state line. This is one market, one region. That makes a huge difference. The second part of that, there is a corny phrase that we're a big little town. You meet someone the first time, they're going to do everything they can to make sure you're successful. And when we bring clients in and they meet our local companies of, hey, I'm such company, this is why I'm growing in Kansas City, here's what's happening from our labor force, our taxes, our incentives. I get paid to say it. Companies that say it not only leave the meeting, they follow up afterwards with follow-up information. There's that collective will help each other grow in the market that resonates. And again, Panasonic said it so well. They picked us over a couple markets they considered because of the people. Not only their labor force, but the people they met at the government sector, the private sector, who all said, this is why we're successful here, and we'll help you grow here. That doesn't happen in a lot of markets. A lot of markets will have the client look around, see him at the end of the visit, and hope they had a good visit. We pick them up at the airport, we show them this market, we're engaged about it. There is a real, you can't really market Kansas City nice, but there is an opportunity for us to tell companies why there's a difference here. Quality of life, cost of living, all those things factor in that a lot of other markets don't promote.
So some honest talk. You talk about having representatives from both sides of the state line in the room. I think on the outside of that room, it appears that there's still a lot of dogfighting going on over who's going to land the deal on which side of the state line kind of thing. How does that collaboration work? And how do those decisions get made? Do you try to equally present both sides and let the client decide? Give us some insight into how you manage that, because I think we've all seen it go poorly in some instances, publicly poorly in other instances, but there is no doubt that there are parties on both sides of the state line that understand the importance of one Kansas City to both states, fortunately.
Again, to remind you, I work net new, so it's companies that are not in the market now. All those stories of companies that are here doing certain things are not my clients. So net new.
I mean, the Chiefs aren't your clients.
There is a understanding that this market is competitive for them, both sides of the state line. Yeah. We become an advocate of the deal. So I'm going to tell my client, hey, let me gather information about real estate, labor force, supply chain assets, transportation partners, labor, all those things, and we present it to the client. Both Missouri and Kansas's incentive proposal, Olathe or Independence's proposal, we presented to the client together. Here it is. Here's what this market says to compete against Dallas. That stays true. Granted, in that first meeting, when both states are in the room, we're talking about Kansas City. But then we go visit the site in wherever, Olathe, Gardner, Edgerton, and that local community is talking about why they're the best market for you to be in. They rarely do they say, we're better than Independence.
Sure.
We're better than Columbus, we're better than Dallas. And we compete to win that deal. It is absolutely every time there is a non-fighting among the Kansas City region to win the deal over a competitive market that's not here.
There have often been headwinds with existing businesses here, especially in some of the organizations. Like we had this conversation with Kim. Sometimes when you're bringing competitors or even non-competitors that are in a similar space, there's this, is there enough talent, that kind of thing. So on one hand, I'm surprised to hear you say that there's oftentimes a lot of businesses in the room that are, putting their best foot forward, because I've heard others say it's tough when you're always attracting people who we think are going to take our employees or drain the talent pool, that we're trying so hard to manage here. How do you manage that conversation? How does that really kind of come to fruition?
Most of the people we're bringing to the table are partners of that company that might come in, not necessarily their competitor. But the companies we work with say, I want to interview 4 manufacturers while I'm here and find out what their labor's doing. We work real hard to set those up. We don't go into meetings. They can say what their turnover is, what their pay scales are, and other things. And most of the time we're successful doing that. There are other times local companies say, I don't want to meet with a competitor. Or a like company that's going to come into our market. But what we need to do in that edge in Kansas City, it's not coming to the market and take his workers. It's coming to the market and train the workers you need so that everybody has an opportunity to compete against that. And again, I keep talking about Panasonic. They're the most recent successful group. They are talking about high school, middle school, training them up so that they can take jobs that fit their Panasonic, but other industries at the same time, not just going out there saying, we're going to pay a quarter more. There is all of the groups in Kansas City that are in the labor force, workforce training are working to generate increased workforce, not just workforce that's there and everybody's got to compete against it. And we're seeing population growth. People are moving here for all the things we talked about, the quality of life, the sports, everything that's happening in Kansas City. entertainment, you name it. And they're coming here, and COVID really escalated that because you can be in Kansas City, work remotely to that coastal market, and afford a house and afford a quality of life and be in Kansas City, that those workers have stayed. We're seeing the construction industry that come in to build KCI or one of the other big projects in town. That workforce doesn't want to go back to where they came from. They want another project here because they fell in love with the Kansas City market and they want to grow here. And again, that adds to our workforce, not competitively challenge the workers.
So I want you to wave your magic wand. What's the gap? So when we talk to startups, we oftentimes, when you're talking about your competitive advantage, you have to be, self-aware and talk about like, where's the gap? What do we still need to fill here in the region to be more successful in this space?
There's a couple of things. I mean, from my standpoint, there's the buildings and space. We need more buildings for companies to come in, the speed to market that, hey, here's a 300,000 square foot building that just got built by spec, it's ready for you to move in. We need more, even though I talked about rail, we need more rail served sites because most of them are full now and a lot of companies need to move their raw materials on rail, so we need that. While love our workforce market and the workforce training, it still needs to continue to get better. It would be great, I think, in you talked about the animal health industry and others, that there'd be a champion across the whole workforce training avenue of who's doing what the best, how they do it, let's fill the gaps, let's make sure we're getting the right skill sets training. And those are all things that we as a region continue to work hard on to get better. We don't have transportation congestion, but we still need to keep thinking 20 years out of where does that infrastructure need to be, where's the growth happening, whether it's residential or industrial, where do we need to plan for? So again, there's things that can be filled because we're all working on it, as opposed to getting a choke point, and then we need to figure out how do we fix it.
Chris, I want to shift the conversation a little bit to kind of one of our favorite topics, which is innovation and kind of the future of where we're at. I think you and I were talking earlier, and it's fascinating to me that we always fall in love with the next new shiny, bright shiny object in terms of industry segments in Kansas City and so on. We have this underpinning of these industries and sectors that have built the region, that continue to define the region, yours being one of them. And these are also the industries or sectors where, we're ripe for innovation because they've been here so long and because they are what we would call these, maybe using legacy technology, don't fix what's not broke. My dad used to say but we're ripe for innovation with some of the emerging technologies. Talk to me a little bit about what you see or what you see as the future of kind of where this industry sits in Kansas City and some of the areas you're focused on.
Yeah, there's three that come immediately to top of mind. One is automation. As we look with new technologies and the higher skilled manufacturing and other things, there's ways that some parts of it can be automated. And the first question everybody says, well, you're eliminating that job. No, that job is becoming higher skilled because it's got to make sure it understands the automation, reprogram it, do kind of that technical maintenance on it. It's changing the job description and the skill level. But automation's one, and you're seeing a lot of companies locally come up with new inventions, new technology, new innovation in that can be used across multiple sectors, like you and I talked about earlier. It's the space in between sectors, not necessarily that sector. The other, robotics. You're seeing that across the board, whether it's delivering products to your home with some of that robotic technology, whether it's cars that are becoming more self-drivable, or it's in the manufacturing distribution space that's moving. The manual jobs that can get the workforce to focus on the higher skilled, putting that robotics in there. And the third, I think everybody loves that they can go on the UPS website, put in their tracker and find out where their product is. Doesn't always right, but you can find out where it is. Visibility in the supply chain. Where is my freight? When is it going to arrive? Because I've got to make decisions on inventory and other things. That is getting so much better, but there's so much more opportunity against all modes working together globally. And again, there's some great innovation in that, but I think there's more opportunity in that.
We had a conversation here recently, you just reminded me of, it was around nuclear energy. And this is one of those things where we talk about a concept and we don't get specific enough for the light to fully come on for folks. And we were talking about there's a lot of conversations right now about AI displacing workforce. But when you look at the demand side of what that starts to create from an energy consumption and some of those other things, the amount of nuclear engineers, civil engineers, just the amount of folks we need to continue to build infrastructure, which is something Kansas City's been good at forever, is exponentially higher than the number of jobs that can be displaced locally because of artificial intelligence. And we don't talk about the next generation of jobs. It might not look like that generation of jobs that might get displaced. It might be something different. I assume there are similar things when you talk about automation, you talk about robotics, you talk about some of the technologies that will enable workforce displacement or transition. Where are some of those hot kind of job opportunities that you see in the space that you're talking about?
Yeah, that maintenance job that I mentioned earlier, it is a high-paying, 6-digit, highly skilled, and they're maintaining and reprogramming the automation, the high-skilled manufacturing equipment. That is an area in Kansas City and a lot of competitor markets for us that don't have enough of those. They need to be and they are part of a lot of the workforce training programs, but we need more of them. And again, some of it is an upskill, taking someone that currently has a job, but they can grow within that company. A lot of them is getting to that middle school and high schooler. There's all kinds of chatter about those kids are spending too much time gaming, but that gaming experience, that gaming technology is right in that center of what this automation maintenance techs need. We need more of them. That is a big piece. The other is, forklift drivers. You think, well, forklift drivers just running around. There's technology out there, again, back to the gaming joke, that a guy could sit in Kansas City driving the forklift in California because it's all automated, it's all kind of superior technology, and they're doing that in a warehouse because, again, that forklift's picking up freight and moving it here. It's not something an employee can really do all day long and not have mistakes because it's a task that he's got to be on point, she's got to be on point. That can be automated, and I think that's something that's in there. To the AI and the data centers, we're focused on the supply chain to it. Heating and cooling systems, racking, all of the things that are inside that data, not the computers and the software and the technology, but the hard assets that are inside. A lot of those companies are here, generator sets and others, and they're growing tremendously. We're promoting Kansas City, one, because we're seeing growth in that space, but two, we're centrally located. You can move it to wherever that growth is happening. We've got a big outreach that's going out in a month or so to that sector to say, we've got the engineers, the construction companies that are building these data centers and AI facilities, come here to be part of what's going into those buildings.
So you talked about, and you briefly mentioned it, the refrigeration, the supply chain to the data centers. Talk to me a little bit more about kind of what that focus looks like and how that conversation, is that a recruiting effort to some of those companies that do that? Is that happening organically because of the number of data centers that are starting to locate in a market like Kansas City? Yeah.
It's both. There's a company in Kansas City called Central Power. They just got a new warehouse up in Platte City, a brand new building that was built by Van Trust north of the airport. They took the second building, Van Trust, because the orders for generators and that systems around data centers is just exploding. So again, that's a company that's manufacturing generators, warehousing, shipping, all the distribution, all of that is happening in Kansas City. Again, central location, all those benefits. So it is building the assets and the companies that are here, but it's also recruiting the ones that are not here for those same advantages, to take advantage of what's being built here, but also the ability to move that product, whatever it is, to that next growth in another market.
So you've been doing this for a minute.
23 years.
All right, I wasn't going to say it. He's been doing this for 23 years. There are a lot of anchors here. There are a lot of companies that have been here for a long time. What's the engagement from those corporations, those enterprise players look like with maybe the startup community? Do you ever get requests for, hey, we're looking for a technology, we're looking for a company that does X, we're trying to grow in this area? Do you have any connections from an innovation or a startup perspective?
For sure. My group, we're a not-for-profit. We're supported by probably 85% is private sector investment in our effort to grow this in the Kansas City region. And it's companies like the railroads, trucking companies, freight brokerage, 3PLs, construction companies, subcontractors, staffing companies, anybody that's going to touch this sector. They are, and again, they're competitors, but they're at the table trying to grow Kansas City. They're always telling us what's challenging them. And again, they know that's not what we do, but they know we have connections to that industry. So yeah, a lot of them are trying to take the need they might have for innovation in their current facility, but invest in it for the industry because they see that opportunity. So, and again, it's a lot of things we've already talked about, that automation, the ability to store and move freight more efficiently around the transportation industry. Each of the modes are looking at new technology, whether it's greener technology or whatever it is to move freight more efficiently. So yeah, we've got that group together. They're helping us bring companies to Kansas City, but they're also talking among themselves about where they need that next innovation.
If you're a startup in the logistics, or Warren Wang, I'm looking at you. If you're a startup in this space, what advice would you give to a founder who's wanting to engage with some of these companies that are, maybe looking outside the market because they don't know that there's logistics innovation, there's transportation, and even on the supply chain side, some folks from a compute perspective and some of the other things that they're working on might be here.
You asked earlier about the gaps and something that we need. In Kansas City, we're a significant transportation logistics hub, but there's not a group that brings that group together. I mean, we do in the hunt of new companies that move in, but we used to have a group called the CSCMP, Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, headquartered out of Chicago. They kind of put some constraints on that local chapter and it closed. We used to have a transportation club, and still do. Who said that? There you go. There's an air cargo group that doesn't get enough attention. I mean, a lot of that's got to be built upon so that industry comes together, so technology and innovators can meet. We try to do an annual meeting every year. SmartPort does around the sectors that are part of transportation logistics. We've done technology ones in the past. We probably need to get that back on the agenda. But I'd find out more details of the transportation club, because I apologize, I thought it went away. Are you talking about the guy out of St. Louis, Brad? Okay, but it's Brad's group. There you go. I hadn't known it grown. I knew Brad was trying to get it started here, so fantastic. That's a group that you need to connect to because the sector's there.
Yeah. If you were identify maybe the top 5 areas, so a transportation group, you talked about air cargo. What are the other, if you were to say, clusters of innovation? You named robotics, automation, some of those types of things. Ones that might not be at the top of people's mind, like a new technology, like some of those ones that you mentioned.
Another group of companies that are part of SmartPort is the material handling, everything inside the distribution center. So, racking to conveyors, that is becoming tremendous automation. Telling people what the product they need to bring to what place, putting innovation in so that they don't have to manually go get the product. It just continues to get, from the robotic systems that are moving pallets around the warehouse, I think that's going to continue to grow. There's more opportunity in that space.
So when Kim was here, and I've had this conversation with Kim for years about capital formation and the investment opportunities and where that comes from. And they do an investor conference to try to get more of that, maybe VC money and some of those opportunities. What's that look like in Kansas City in your space? And are there opportunities for us to maybe take similar approaches to bringing some of that capital?
And that's a space I don't know enough about, because again, my clients are the companies we're trying to attract here. The partners I have here are companies to benefit them. I don't know much about that space. I know there's been a number of people that have talked about trying to start some sort of collaborative effort, but I don't know enough about it.
And then now talk to me about the universities. I know KU, the School of Business, has a pretty robust supply chain management program. I know UMKC has a supply chain degree. What are the university relationships? We have trade skills, obviously, CDL, some of the things that might be more on the industry side. What is the other relationship, opportunity look like with
K-State also has a significant supply chain program. They're looking at ways to get the students engaged. KU's program, for example, takes those students to Europe once a year to a supply chain logistics leader in the U.S. to give them hands-on understanding what's going on. They've got great internship programs they're trying to place. We help them try to get those students involved in the industry at the high school level as well, and the college. They are not as collectively working together, I wouldn't say, but there is an opportunity for them to really take some of the technology and innovation and stuff that they're doing at the university to a higher level.
Oh, Chris, you might have hit my hot button.
There you go.
I, for years, listened to the universities talk about taking their top students to Silicon Valley. And I was always amazed that they never brought their top students to see Kansas City's enterprise companies and some of the headquarters we had here. And when we pressed them on it, they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. It seems like with the global standing of this market, that instead of taking supply chain students to Europe, I mean, I guess there's things to learn there that they might not see here. But it seems like this would be the place you'd want to bring them, and it's a short field trip versus having to fly them.
Well, don't get me wrong. The KU program brings those students to companies in this area and does tours and does meetings. In Europe, they're going to Rotterdam. They're going to some of the global leading ports to see how supply chain works there. They go to the UPS corporate hub to really see how that works. So they're going to those big name places, but they're also coming here and touring companies that are involved.
Good, good. 10 years from now, if we continue kind of on the swing that we're on, it seems like it's a positive swing for the region in your space in particular, and the adjacencies as well that are being recognized. You know, what's this look like? And where is Kansas City positioned in the North American kind of logistics and supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, back to that comment, everybody wants to chase the next best thing. I mean, I think Kansas City in this space has the opportunity to continue to just grow. There's going to be more industrial real estate, more opportunities for growth there. There's more of the foreign companies are considering the Kansas City market the Midwest competitive advantage than the coast that they all know, New York and LA and Chicago and Miami. There's more opportunity here. There's more cost advantage here. I think that you're going to see that continue to grow. I put this on about 6 weeks ago and haven't taken it off. You know, the world is about to be on us, already is looking at us. There's huge opportunity. The 4 base camp countries that are going to be here, as well as the teams that are playing, their leadership from a government perspective, a corporate perspective, are already coming into Kansas City to see what's happening here. You know, there's reasons those 4 countries picked us. Such a location, easy transportation access, better quality of life, all those things. Their business is going to follow that. What we need to take advantage of is right when the World Cup's over, we need to be telling that story even harder to the business community of why they're successful here, what the advantages are. And I think you're going to see that global stage get more prominent in Kansas City over the next 10 years.
For someone who's, you know, you painted a macro picture of what the sector looks like and the pieces around that. If someone's interested in trying to figure out how to engage, help, support, grow, what advice would you give them? Where do they go? What kind of engagement could they look for?
Yeah, I mean, I think one here, obviously you're bringing people together. There's a number of other groups that are doing that from a business standpoint. SmartPort has one big event a year. That would be one to look at. It's, if we pick a sector, this year we really looked at what was happening in kind of selecting Kansas City from an industrial real estate standpoint. We had 800 people at Bartle Hall. We've done automotive, we've done railroading, we've done e-commerce, different things. Our investors get together 4 times a year just to network among themselves. If someone in the space wants to come and be a guest at that, we can bring them into those meetings. We're going to have the next one in our office in Union Station. England's going to be playing. We'll be on the screen June 17th. FanFest won't be going on, but there'll be a lot going on around Kansas City around World Cup. And again, it's a way for us to get our investor base, the membership base, connected to the local industry.
Chris, thanks for what you do. We started the conversation off, and you and I were talking earlier about the undervalue of our legacy industries in Kansas City, and they're not the baby bright shiny objects, but they are what power, kind of the economy here, and they continue to kind of rocket and grow. So appreciate 23 years. Looking forward to kind of what the future holds in store for this, especially as we try to be a centerpiece for innovation and bringing more of that into Kansas City versus it being sought outside of the market. So thanks for coming here and explaining to us kind of what's going on. Would love to have you back as we talk about maybe more specific sectors or more some of these adjacencies. But thanks for being a part of the conversation today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for joining us.